I get asked a lot of questions about how my dad and I biked across the United States by people who want to bike across the United States themselves. So in this video, I'm going to teach you how to bike across the United States. I'm going to try to cover all of these topics. I think these are the big major ones. I'm going to try to touch on every piece of biking across the United States. And then later I can make some videos diving into the details on different specifics, like specifically stealth camping or specifically the best bicycles. But I'll try to cover those topics at a higher level. We started seriously prepping probably a couple months before, but had the idea for a long time, and we've done bike touring for a long time. But to bike across the US, you do not need to have bike toured ever in your life. I would recommend doing a couple weekend trips before you actually do the whole thing, but if you've never done any big tours, that's fine. You can still bike across the United States. My previous longest trip was 2 years ago. I did around Lake Michigan with my dad again. That was 1,000 miles. A pro tip is if you've ever gone backpacking and you also like biking, it's going to be very easy for you to acquire the skills to bike tour or bike pack. I'm going to use those words interchangeably. Just for the insiders, bike touring is more on the road, and then bike packing is more off-road stuff. But really, there's not much distinction. What route did we take? First up, there are lots of pre-made routes, and we decided to make our own. My dad and I are both comfortable making routes, and so we understand what a safe road looks like, what a nice shoulder looks like, how to make detours, how to use Google Street View, and then our user, we use Ride with GPS typically to drag the points and find the right routes. That's a more advanced technique, and you don't even need to be able to do this to bike across the US because the Adventure Cycling Association has all these pre-made routes. They're not the only ones with pre-made routes, but they make very, very good routes. Basically, you can buy these maps or buy these GPX files, and they have insider tips, like you call this number and you'll get in contact with the mayor of this small town. The mayor will unlock the bathrooms at a park for you, and you can sleep there overnight. Most people we encountered biking across the US were on some type of adventure cycling map, and we used adventure cycling maps for about a third of our entire trip. Really convenient and super well made. Thousands of people bike all these routes every year, and it's worth the investment. The most popular route is called the Transamerica Trail. It's from Oregon all the way to Virginia, about 4,000 miles. It started in 1976 during the bicentennial, the bike centennial. So tens of thousands of cyclists have done this route, and it's well made, and there's lots of support and culture for the people that ride this route. The shortest route across the United States is along the southern tier through the Adventure Cycling Association. It's a little under 3,000 miles, and I recommend doing it in the colder months because it's through the southern United States. You'll cook otherwise. Now you have your route. How are you going to navigate along that route? You have to go across the entire United States, and you don't want to use your phone. First off, Google Maps is not a reliable source when it comes to biking across the United States. It's going to take you on wacky routes. Like in Pittsburgh, we were on some roads that were definitely not roads because we needed Google Maps to do the last bit of a segment. So don't rely on Google Maps. How are you going to navigate? There's some great apps that you can use if you're going to use your phone, but just know that'll take a lot of battery, and I'll talk about charging battery later in this. Ride with GPS, Strava, Komoot, and there are some other GPS apps that you can use to upload these GPX files, and then it can tell you where to go, turn-by-turn navigation. Another alternative is doing it old school, using the maps from Adventure Cycling Association. That's a bit trickier. I just can't imagine navigating from a map myself, but that's how people did it back in the day, up until 20 years ago. Although some days we were on the same highway for the entire day. We didn't take a single turn, and it was just so easy that way. So navigating isn't always like turn 1 mile, turn 1 mile, turn 1 mile, because you're going really, really long stretches, so you don't need to worry about that. What my dad and I did is we both had computers, bike computers specific to cycling that we mounted on our bikes. These are very efficient on batteries, so we could record the entire day and also have navigation the entire day. And then I would probably charge mine every 5 days, 6 days, something like that. My dad used the Garmin 530, I used the Garmin 830. Other brands are Wahoo, Hammerhead, and beyond that, I would not recommend many other bike computers for going across the entire United States. You want them to be reliable, and you want to trust that they're going to not glitch out, and not die, and not tell you the wrong thing. So just go with the big brands. That's what I would recommend here. It's really worth the investment because it saves you so much mental headache of having to navigate. You can just sit back and let the computer beep at you when it's time to turn, and also record your rides so you can save it for future. Like I love using Strava, so I have all my rides up on Strava and you can see my mileage. Plus your friends being able to stay updated on Strava with your rides, love that. Download Google Maps for all the way along your route. This way when you don't have internet, you're still going to be able to look ahead and see how many miles away something is or search for different places along your route. It doesn't take up that much memory and it's totally worth it. How fit do you have to be to bike across the United States? I'm going to tell you right now, you don't have to be crazy fit. You don't have to be fit fit at all. You don't even have to be good at biking. My dad and I met somebody whose longest ride before she started her US bike tour, she did it all the way across the United States. Her longest ride before that was 10 miles. And then she decided, I want to bike across the US. And so she did. Incredibly impressive. And then I wouldn't recommend going that route because it's going to make things just a little tougher in your first couple weeks. My recommendation is riding maybe 5 to 10 hours per week and then have a couple weekend bike touring trips with all of your gear so you get a feel for the weight on your bike. And this will give you the fitness, and it'll also make your butt feel okay. Because the biggest thing is just your butt's gonna hurt and your legs are gonna hurt for the first week if you don't train enough. But then after that, you start to get fit on the ride. You get fit because you're riding and then you're resting and riding and resting, and you're never going at a very, very hard rate. I'm always wanting to go with the easiest gears possible, and that's gonna help you go day after day after day. We're also taking breaks every hour. We're taking at least 5-minute breaks to stop, eat some food, and I'll talk about nutrition later. And then you can also take rest days. So we were pushing it. My dad and I were pushing it. We were going about 90 miles every single day, and our rest days were probably 40 miles. Most people don't do that. You can recommend 60 or 70 miles a day. So say you're riding 10 miles per hour at a very nice, easy pace. That's 7 hours of riding a day, 6 hours of riding a day. And then every now and then you take a day where you just don't do any miles. Say you're in a city you like with some people you like. You can take that whole day off and you don't have to do anything. Here comes a goose. So that's it. You should go for a couple weekend bike tours beforehand so you get to test out all your gear. Gear is the next section, and you also get to test out your fitness, because the first couple days it's going to be hard. You got to understand that. You're going to get more and more fit as you ride more and more, and everybody can get more fit. But the trick to getting more fit while you're riding is don't overexert yourself. You don't want to be absolutely dying for the entire day. You want to feel comfortable the entire time you're riding. It's like, oh yeah, I have enough fitness to ride this far, but maybe mentally you can't ride that far. Mentally you can't keep up with it, but you never want to feel like your legs are absolutely gassed. And that's fine if they are. That just means it's probably time for a complete 0 day, ride no miles, take a rest day. If you can do 3 days on the bike, you can probably do 3 months fitness wise. Now the big question, what gear do you need to bike across the US? I'm just going to say you can do it with any gear. Gear does not actually matter whether or not you can complete your bike ride across the United States. I'm saying that because in the 1890s people crossed bicycles and there weren't even highways across it. They had to do dirt and whatever, like there wasn't any food stops, or they didn't have maps of the entire US, and they were able to bike across the United States. So if you're wondering steel frame or aluminum or carbon, just know it doesn't really matter. The advantage from the steel frame bike touring crowd is that if your frame gets bent, you can just bend it back and that's fine. But really, that's not too common, and it's not going to happen that often. So my suggestion is get a bike that you're comfortable with. My dad and I both did it on Trek checkpoints. Honestly, they're kind of the best bike for biking across the US this way. Maybe they're not the most comfortable though. It's a bit more aggressive position with drop bars, and that's not for everybody. If you're prone to back aches or something like that, I would suggest a more upright bike. Sure, the wind is going to have a lot more effect on you, but it's going to be a lot more comfortable in the long run, and your goal here is just to make it across the US. You're not trying to go as fast as possible, you're just trying to get miles in every day and keep your body happy. Important things to consider when you're buying a bike is if it has bolt mounts for your back rack, if that's the setup you're going with. The traditional bike packing setup is a back rack and a front rack with 2 bags on each side. These bags are called panniers and probably hold up to 40 liters of stuff. I've been bike touring with more of a bike packing setup, so that's a bag attached to my seat and then a handlebar bag and then a frame bag. This is a bit less space, but it seems more aerodynamic. It can deal with bounces a little better, and I just think it looks cool, so that's why I went for it. So on one hand, with the panniers, you're going to have a lot more flexible storage space, but with the bike packing setup, it's going to be a bit more aerodynamic. Honestly, for the next time I go bike touring, I might switch to panniers just because of the packing time. I had to pack my bag so efficiently because I don't have much space, so everything needs to be in just perfect and tight so that there's no wobble happening, and that was really annoying. It slowed me down and it slowed my dad down, but we were okay with it. We made do with it. That's part of bike touring. You just make do with what you have. And so I might switch to panniers next time, and that's my recommendation for anybody who's just getting into road cycling bike touring. I would go with panniers. It's a very easy to understand setup and foolproof. You need to carry clothes, you need to carry stuff for sleeping, you need to carry stuff for cooking, and you also need to carry stuff that you can eat. Food! Okay, we'll get to food later, but I'll talk about these little subsections first. first. In the sleep subsection, what are we sleeping in? My dad and I shared a 3-person tent. I wouldn't recommend this specific tent because it has leaks. It's the Marmot Tungsten Ultralight 3P, but really it does not matter what tent you have. That's just going to take up more or less space. I'd recommend a tent that takes up less space, that weighs less, but if you have only a heavy tent and that's your budget, you're going to make it across the US just fine. It's just going to be a little slower when you have more weight. There are great 1-person bike packing tents available on Amazon that are no-name brand, and there are also great ultralight tents that are name brand that are very expensive that are also going to be super light and awesome for you. It really depends on your budget here. I'll put links to gear recommendations in the description below so you can have all these for later. My dad and I both had inflatable mattress sleeping pads, and these were excellent. I had never used one before. I mostly had the Thermarest self-inflating kind of half foam things, and that wasn't quite as comfortable, and I never realized why. But now I have the Nemo whatever. Tents are insulated, and I absolutely love that. There's an old version and a new version, so you can get the old version for cheaper if you like, and that's so comfortable. And my dad has the REI version, which is a little cheaper, but also a little heavier and more space, so that's just the trade-off on the price. You're gonna want good sleep every night, so I totally recommend having good camping gear. The coldest it got at night was 45 degrees, so I had a sleeping bag that was rated for 30 degrees, and I was fine the entire trip. At some points it got like to 60 degrees at night, 70 degrees at night, so I was just sleeping on top of my sleeping bag, but you just want to have it in case for the cold nights. Our cooking setup was as simple as a portable burner, some butane, a pot, and a spoon, and then we shared that, and that was fine. You don't need any more than that. And then for clothes, you want to pack for every amount of weather you're in, but don't bring any extras. You can wash your clothes in rivers, you can do everything like that. So I'll put all the clothes I have on the screen now, and it'll also be down in the description. This is where people overpack. You do not need many multiples of clothes besides socks maybe. I brought 4 pairs of socks, which I thought was going to be too many, but it turned out to be just the perfect amount, because when your sock's wet and then it's wet the next day and then it's wet the next day, that's not a good combination, especially when it starts to get cold, and that's what happened to us in Colorado. So I was just on my last pair of socks before it got sunny and warm again for them to dry out. Definitely get a pair of padded bike shorts. 2 pairs is my recommendation. Some people like bibs. I like bibs when I'm road cycling, but I don't like bibs when I'm bike touring, and that's because you have to go to the bathroom. You're going to the bathroom every single day, and it's just annoying to have to take your whole shirt off and then the bibs off. It's very annoying, so I recommend shorts for that reason. Don't forget about rain gear. My dad brought rain pants. I didn't bring rain pants, and I was fine with that decision, except for one day when it was super cold, and that's fine. I just was cold that day. You should expect to be comfortable 90% of the time, and then 10% of the time you should expect to be uncomfortable. That is going to allow you to pack a lot lighter. Where in the world did we sleep? We slept in all kinds of places. We liked stealth camping a lot, and that's kind of a tricky, it's a bit of an art, but it's also a rite of passage if you're bike touring. So stealth camping, think about you're way out west in the middle of nowhere and there's a national forest. You can just set up wherever you like, but now you get a little more aggressive, and so you're still out west, very tiny towns, and you just get to the outskirts of a town and there's a nice wooded area next to a park that nobody's going to go to until the next morning or the next afternoon. So you set up, starts to get dark, you set up your tent there, starts to get light, you pack up, and then you can go eat breakfast in the pavilion while people are starting to enjoy the park. I'm going to make a whole video about stealth camping because I absolutely love it, but there are all these alternatives to stealth camping. You can also pay for a campground. These are going to be $15-30 every single night, and that adds up, especially if you're bike touring over 2 months. And you don't need to do this because oftentimes you can stealth camp for free, but I understand that there's a lot of comfort being in a place that you're allowed to be. So we stayed in a few campgrounds throughout the time. We also made our route so that we went past friends' houses, and we also stayed in a Warm Showers host. Warm Showers is the bike touring hack. You have to know about Warm Showers. It's this community of bike tourers for bike tours where you basically just message people who are hosting, and they'll host you along the way. You'll be like, hey, I'm getting to your town at this time. Would you be able to host me like 3 days from now? And they reply like yes or no. We have a bed open for you. And usually they'll say yes. They're super nice people. It's really fun to meet people this way. And typically they're friendly. If you're open enough to host somebody, you're going to be a friendly person. And sometimes they'll give you dinner. Sometimes they'll give you breakfast. Sometimes they'll make you coffee. But you'll always have a bed. That's the best part. It's all free. It's reciprocal. So it's kind of the expectation is if you use some Warm Showers hosts, then you'll host somebody in the future. And maybe not when you're on a bike tour, of course. It's also really nice to have Wi-Fi and outlets. That's one way that we charged our phones. So just when we were at a person's house. The membership fee is $30. I think it's a one-time fee, and then you get access to this whole peer-to-peer community for bike touring. Totally recommend staying with some Warm Showers hosts on your way. And then we did a few hotels. It's okay to do a few hotels, just depending on your budget. Sometimes we didn't feel social enough to want to be hosted by a Warm Showers host, and that just meant we stayed in a hotel or a motel. And I don't know, read the reviews. Don't book at the counter, book on your phone before you get there. You're always going to get a cheaper price that way. And yeah, enjoy the continental breakfast. Every day, maybe around noon when we were eating lunch, we would start to figure out where we were going to end up for the day, because you have a best idea about weather, you have best idea about how you're going to feel. So we're like, yeah, we got about 60 miles left in us. No, we probably got 20 miles left in us, blah, blah, blah. So that's when we would kind of figure it out. Some people want to pick it every single day, like I'm going to bike 60 miles a day, 60 miles a day. And that's fine. That's the style of bike touring. We chose to try to maximize the daylight we had, so we were always riding as long as possible, and then we would find our spot to camp. And so what we would do is we would be on our route, and then we kind of forecast, yep, 60 miles down the route puts us near this town. So then we'd start looking for stealth camping spots or campgrounds or free campsites, that kind of thing. There are places to camp for free throughout the U.S., like BLM land, National Forest Service, state forests, town forests even. So maybe you can get creative sometimes, and rather than having to stealth camp at a park, you can also wild camp in a national forest. Let's talk about electronics. I have my phone, my Garmin, and then also our lights, and our way to charge it was using the Anker power cores. Any other portable battery will do, but I think the Ankers are always the highest rated, and I totally recommend mine. I had a 20,000 milliamp hour battery and then also a 10,000 milliamp hour battery, so 30,000 milliamp hours. My dad and I split that between the two of us, and we would have to recharge the portable batteries every 5 or 6 days. So as long as we were sleeping somewhere that had a power outlet every 5 or 6 days, we never had to think about power. And I was editing videos the entire time I was biking across the US, so that took a lot more battery. And I assume if you're more sparing with how you're using your phone, we also kept our phones on airplane mode while we were riding, just to save battery that way, and also kept our Garmin's on battery save mode, so we wouldn't spend as much. But a portable charger, having a large capacity of portable chargers, is the way to go, even though it's a little heavy. We brought a solar panel for fun. My mom got us one before the trip started, and that was more of a novelty, because the thing is, you need absolutely perfect direct sunlight for this thing to work. We would end our days at 6 p.m., 7 p.m., and the sun's starting to get soft, so we maybe have an hour or two where we can use the solar panel, and it charges so slow that it's just not going to work. You really can't attach it to the back of your bike, even though people want you to think you can. It's not going to charge fast enough that way. Another thing that people do is use a dynamo hub. These are super cool, but also a little bit more expensive and kind of a headache to install. You have to basically take out your hub and reinstall this special hub, so when you're spinning your wheel, it creates a way to charge your phone. So at the end of a day of riding, your phone can be full. If you're doing a style of bike tour where you're not going to see a power outlet for a very, very long time, this might be the way to go to keep your devices charged. I really had fun showing what I ate in my US bike tour vlogs, because food is one of the most fun parts about biking. You're going to eat so many calories every single day. We were eating like 6,000 calories a day, and that's because you're burning 6,000 calories every day. Maybe if you're biking fewer miles, you're not going to burn quite as many, but still, it's absolutely nuts how many calories you can burn. Basically anything you can get inside of your body, you're going to use. Let's think about the three categories. You got carbs, protein, and fats. What are they used for? And then we can kind of figure out how much we need when we're bike touring. Let's start with protein. Protein does not give you energy. All protein does is help rebuild your muscles. That's what you should think about it as. So at the end of a long day, that's when your body's going to start using the protein the most. Protein will not give you energy, so like a beef jerky stick, it's going to taste good, but it's more protein than it is carbs. So you're going to want protein for rebuilding your muscles, but it won't give you energy while you're riding. Carbs, on the other hand, are going to give you fast, quick energy. We were eating mostly carbs this entire ride, probably 80% carbs. That's because you're riding and your body needs glucose immediately. We're going to get a little scientific here. So how it works is you ingest glucose, and then this glucose gets turned into energy. If you remember the Krebs cycle from biology, that's something that glucose directly contributes to. So eating complex sugars like breads or eating simple sugars like Oreos, either way, that's going to give you this fast source of energy that you need. And then there's fat. Fat is a lot slower source of energy. It's not going to be immediate. So you're not going to like eat some olive oil while you're riding and all of a sudden like, oh, I was feeling so bad. Oh my goodness, I feel so much better now after eating that olive oil. That's not the case. Fat is going to be slow, consistent energy. So having good amounts of fat inside you means you don't have to keep chasing the cycle of energy. If you just eat carbs and no fat, that's fine, but you have to eat carbs consistently. You can't stop. Otherwise, you're going to absolutely crash. And having lots of fats in your diet are going to make sure that you don't crash. Even though you have carbs to send you up in energy, the fats are going to maintain your base level of energy, so you have more consistent, stable energy throughout your entire day of riding. And if you're listening to this and thinking about what you should eat, I have a video, what we ate in a day. It's not a good representation, it's not healthy at all, but somehow we got to 6,000 calories. You'd also think about pizza. Pizza's the perfect food, as I'm sure you want to hear. You got cheese, which is protein and fat. You have pepperoni, which is more protein, and then you have the crust, which is carbs. You get the big three. I don't know how pizza's not the most nutritious food for bike touring. Also, you got to think about hydration. Hydration's super important because you're outside all day, and the summer heat probably, you're going to be sweating so much. We were probably going through 6 water bottles every single day and filling up at gas stations. Like, gas station stops are your absolute friend. McDonald's stops, I know people love. Other restaurant fast food stops, they're going to be consistent. The employees aren't going to mind if you're filling up your water bottles in the drinking fountain, and there are also bathrooms. Bathrooms are awesome. You're going to have to get comfortable with having some subpar water. We would fill up water in those bathrooms when they didn't have drinking fountains. Sometimes it's not the best water. You're not going to bring a Brita with you. It's just part of bike touring. Water is water. You're going to get used to it. I carried capacity for 96 fluid ounces with me. That was about a good amount. We never were struggling to find any more water after that. We did bring water filtration devices, but didn't have to use them just because our route took us through many, many towns, and it was never an issue to stop at a gas station every 30 to 50 miles. You will go a little crazy when you're afraid you're going to be running out of water or running out of food, so you got to keep your mental game in check. That's the biggest part about this. It's more than the fitness game. You got to keep your mental game in check. If you're alone, it's going to be a little harder. I was with my dad, so I had somebody, but think about listening to music when you need it. Don't listen to music all the time. This is my strategy. My strategy is only listen to music when my mental game is not doing well. When I'm like at my lowest points, then all of a sudden it's like, okay, you're allowed some music. And it hits really, really hard. I know some people that listen to like 14 audiobooks on their bike rides across the US, or you can listen to tons of podcasts. Just make sure you're downloading these things. Cellular data takes a lot of battery, so if you download things when you have Wi-Fi, that's going to be the move. Also, hopping on a call with somebody, taking a break, or like meeting other bike tours along the way, having a warm showers host so you get an actual conversation with a person, just the things to stay human and keep your human connection alive are going to keep you mentally sound. Also, talking to other bike tourists you see along the way. If you're on one of the pre-made routes from Adventure Cycling, even on our routes that we made ourselves, we were still running into bike tours every now and then. It's very important that you talk to these people, especially if you're alone. This is going to keep you sane. You can share some stories. You can talk about what's along the way, what's coming, what have they done, what have they learned, just anything like that. Because these are your people. You're a bike tourer, they're a bike tourer. This is your time to connect with them, and it's kind of random. Like, you're like, I'm just a random person on a bike in the middle of nowhere, and there's another person on a bike in the middle of nowhere. Like, it's very exciting to talk to these people. So just be friendly, chat, say hi, stop for them. And I'm going to close this out talking about safety. We're really cautious with our places when we stealth camp, and I think we're safe on the road. And also, being in groups makes you safer on the road. I've never had an issue with my bike getting stolen on a bike tour. I have had a bike stolen in Boston, but that's a whole different story. One thing we do is we do lock our bikes up when we're in a place that we think our bike might not be safe. And you just lock them together or lock them to something. We had a cheap cable lock. You don't need to worry about having a U-lock with you or something more intense like that. Just a cheap cable lock with a padlock will be fine. Enough to just deter somebody from picking their bike up and walking out of here. At gas stations, I usually didn't bother because there are cameras on the bike. There are cameras all over the gas station. So if somebody drives up, tosses your bike in the back of their truck and drives away, you got their license plate. If anything, that's going to give you a fun story when the cops go and find the person and get your bike back. It's all about the stories, folks. You got to get some good stories while you're out there, and the only way to get good stories is to take some risks. Now, more seriously, if you think about all the times when you've heard a car hitting a bike, it's usually because the car didn't see the cyclist. So our big challenge as cyclists, we're not going to be able to change these drivers. So the only actions that we can take is to be more visible. Wear neon, have a blinking flashing light that's super bright. I have the Raveman TR500. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but it's just a super bright rear light that has a long battery life. I recommend it. And also understanding what the risks are. If there's no shoulder on a super busy highway, that's probably a bad route to be on. Adventure cycling is not going to take you on these bad routes intentionally. There are always going to be a couple roads that are necessary that are going to be scary, but just take your time with them. You can always walk your bike in the median if you feel unsafe. No need to push it, but typically, everywhere I've been, drivers have been nice. They might honk at you, they might be mean to you, but they're not going to be evil to you. The only people that will be evil to you are the occasional large souped up trucks. And this is just a fact of biking that everybody's experienced, where you're riding and all of a sudden you hear this massive truck slow down right behind you and then accelerate as hard as they can, he or she, Quit your yapping. And leave a nice plume of black smoke right in your face. The only thing you can do here, first off, you're gonna be safe. Typically these are good drivers and they know what they're doing, which makes it even worse, but they're not gonna hit you. So you have to stay calm in this moment and don't give them the satisfaction of reacting. They want you to freak out, they want you to be scared, they want you to be mad. Don't even react. Pretend like nothing happened and it's gonna drive them insane. Beyond that, drivers are pretty good. If you're out of the city on country roads, they're usually used to slowing down for farm traffic. So you're just another farm vehicle slowing them down a little bit. Like nobody's in that much of a rush unless you maybe live here in Boston. You'll usually have okay drivers. A final safety tip is you can carry some mace. This is gonna be multi-purpose. And the main reason I would start bringing mace, I haven't yet, but I think I might start, is because of dogs chasing you. These dogs usually just wanna play, but they're gonna be fast dogs that aren't leashed up and they aren't fenced in, and so you're just riding and all of a sudden you hear like bark, 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 and there's a dog sprinting after you. Like you can kind of tell they have a smile on their face, but it's always like uh-oh, and you just start sprinting on your bike. That's inevitable. That's also another thing that happens to everybody whenever they start biking. And I might carry some mace just in case there's the occasional dog that does not seem friendly, because that has happened to me. But you know, these quads, I'm pretty fast, I could get away from the dogs, but in the event that there's a dog that corners me, I think I might want some mace. And mace could also be nice at night to have next to you in your tent, so you don't have to, you know, worry about trying to fend somebody off. This has never happened to me, and it's never been an issue, but you know, it is a concern for people when they're camping. So I just want to like make you aware of that issue and aware of a solution to that issue. Another thing is like you're not going to be able to like lock your bike up everywhere at night. And what we would do if we were in a place where we thought our bike might be tampered with, first off, this never happened to us, but we would cable lock our bike into one of the cables or cords on our tent. Like obviously somebody could just like cut the cord and then take the bikes, but it would be enough to know that somebody's tampering with our bikes, so we could jump out of the tent and say, hey, like stop it, whatever, and I don't know, fight the guy. I also have seen a creator talk about putting a carabiner on the zippers of the tent from the inside, and that acts as like a little bit of a lock, so somebody can't just easily unzip your tent. I think that is a high-level overview of every possible thing you'd need to bike tour. I'm sure I missed some things, and I'd love to know what I missed in the comments below, but yeah, I'm going to make more videos like this, giving more information about how to bike tour. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing. I'm going to be posting more. You can also find me on Instagram or TikTok. I like posting videos on there, and keep on rolling.